So recently I decided to buy a new smartphone because it's been a hot minute since I actually upgraded my smartphone. So in this video, I'm going to be talking about my brand spanking new smartphone. What did I finally go with when it comes to smartphones? Well, in this video, I'm going to explain it all. Keep in mind, this video is going to be an extremely long video, unfortunately. Also, keep in mind, on top of that, this video is not going to be a full in-depth review of my brand new smartphone. It's pretty much just going to be the things I'm loving about it and the things I'm not liking about it. So it's going to be kind of like a mini review because at this point, people already reviewed this phone, so there's really no point in me going out there and trying to do a full review when you've probably already seen a review of this product. And like I said, there's so many other reviews, really what's the point? So let's talk about it. Now, when it comes to smartphone tech specifically, I'm usually in the Android ecosystem. I don't hate Apple and I don't hate iOS. It's just that for my needs personally and what I want to do on a smartphone, it boils down to Android can get it done. But of course, each their own, and there's really no wrong answer. Do you like the iOS ecosystem or do you like the Android ecosystem? It just really depends on what you want to get out of your smartphone experience and what do you want to do on your smartphone. It just happens to be that Android is where I go because they have the features that I personally want to use. I'm not going to get into details about why I choose Android over iOS, personal preference there, but yes, I am an Android guy over an iOS person. Now, if you've been on this channel before, that should really be no surprise that I'm an Android person over an iOS person. So what did I actually end up going this time? Did I go with the iPhone with iOS, or did I go with an Android phone running Android? Of course, honestly, I did end up going with another Android phone because, like I said, there's certain features in Android I just can't live without. I mean, could I live without them? Of course, I could live without them, but if it's an option every time, of course, I'm going to take an Android phone. So indeed, I did end up taking an Android phone. Now, when it comes to Android phones, there is a lot to choose from in the smartphone game when it comes to Android because Android is pretty much on every other phone that's not an iPhone, of course. But usually for me personally, when I buy phones, I keep phones so long anyway. I usually like buying the cream of the crop, and that's pretty much what I did here. I bought the cream of the crop. Now, there's really not one you can say that's the best overall Android phone, period, because there's always ups and downs to each individual smartphone on the market. Even if you buy the best brand, you're always going to be losing something because every smartphone seems like it has an advantage over another one. But in general, there are only a couple that you would really consider when you walk into a big retail setting, whether it's your carrier store or whether it's like Best Buy, Walmart, Target, whatever store it is. And honestly, the only two I was really considering at this point were the Samsung, of course, the Samsung S10s. I've had Samsungs in the past. The last phone I was using prior to buying this brand new phone was indeed the Note 5. So you can see I've had a very good experience with Samsung phones. I'm not a Samsung fanboy. It just happens to be that Samsung makes some of the best Android phones on the market. And like I said, I love Android. So usually that's where I look when it comes to buying Android phones. Specifically, I look at Samsung because they're the cream of the crop. And then you have Google over here sitting on the side, and they're making some amazing phones. I will have to be honest with you guys. They're making the Pixel line of phones. Right now, they're on the Google Pixel line of phones, so I was looking at those. There's also LG and there's also Motorola, but when it comes to smartphones, those are kind of iffy because the amount of money you're paying for the amount of features and the amount of things on the phone is just not worth it in my opinion. Those are like a little bit lower tier than Samsung and Google if you're talking about the best of the best in general, but those aren't bad phones to say the least. They're still great phones. They just kind of lack in certain areas, and overall they don't really exceed in one area over other. And most people will agree, if you're going to be spending all this money, you just want the best money can buy, it's usually Samsung or it's usually Google. I don't know who else in the smartphone game does it better than Samsung or does it better than Google when it comes to Android phones. And usually I don't look at the budget options, to be honest, because I can afford something much more substantial than the budget options. And like I said, I keep these phones so long anyway, and I am a power user that I do look at the best of the best. So what phone overall did I go with? Did I go with Samsung or did I go with Google in this instance? They both have their ups and downs, but overall I actually decided to go with the Samsung Galaxy S10. That's the phone I decided to go with overall, and I'm going to explain why I decided to go with the Samsung Galaxy S10. Now, I know there's 3 different models of the Samsung Galaxy S10, so which model did I go with when it comes to the Samsung Galaxy S10? Well, you guys know that there's the Samsung Galaxy S10e, the Samsung Galaxy S10 regular, and then the Samsung Galaxy S10 Plus. Overall, with everything that's going on right now, meaning I got a lot of discounts in store, my trade-in, just everything overall worked out to be that I ended up getting the S10 Plus. Yes, I got the S10 Plus just because I was actually considering the S10 when I was considering a Samsung phone. I was considering the S10, but the thing is though, it wasn't much more money to get the S10 Plus just because with all the in-store discounts and all the sales were going on and my trade-in and everything like that, it happened to be that it was not going to be that much higher. We're not talking like hundreds and hundreds and hundreds more dollars for that phone with everything that I actually got in store. I'm not going to tell you all the details about that, but it ended up being I got the S10 Plus anyway, and I will have to admit I'm a user usually that tries to go for the biggest screen possible since I do a lot of media consumption on my smartphone, and having the biggest screen possible is very important. Could I live with the S10? Yes, I can live with the standard S10, and honestly I was actually wanting the S10 in the first place because of course money, and then on top of that I actually did end up liking the cutout on the normal S10 for the camera, whereas the S10 Plus, you know, has two camera cutouts on the front, so it looks a little bit more aggressive in that way. But it ended up that I just really wanted that phone, and it just made more sense since I'm saving so much money right there. I just decided to get it and everything like that. I was actually surprised when I walked into my local retailer to pick up this phone at my certain retailer. I did actually end up getting a sale for the phone because I didn't even know these phones were on sales at certain retailers and certain places and things like that. And at the time of me buying this, it was on sale, which was absolutely fantastic. And I just got lucky. I wasn't expecting these phones to be on sale. I was just interested in getting a new phone. I was just checking out different deals and things like that, and then a deal popped up for this when I went to the store, which is absolutely fantastic. So let me show you my S10 Plus, and let me show you what color I actually ended up going with, since they do have a couple of different colors, and I'll talk about gag size and all that stuff. So let me go ahead and get my phone really quickly. So here's my Galaxy S10, and they have a lot of different colors in store, and I decided to go with this color specifically. I decided to go with this baby blue type color. Now it's actually funny that Samsung calls this an off-white or some white type of color, and I told the guy at the store I wanted a baby blue or a blue color because for my eyes this looks like a baby blue color, and I asked other people and they do agree too. This is not really a white, it's more like a very light blue type color, and depending on what light hits it or when you rotate it, you can see it's not really a white color, but Samsung calls this white, and they do actually have a true blue color. So when I asked for blue and he opened the box, I was like, wait a second, this is not the one that I wanted, so I had to go get a brand new one, another one. But here it is. I'm so glad I got the color I got. Doesn't really matter, of course it really doesn't matter what the color of the phone is, since you're probably going to be slapping on a case or slapping on a skin anyway. But just knowing that you're paying all this money for these smartphones, you might as well know that you're getting the color that you want, whether you can see the color after all or not see the color after all. So that's why I decided to go with this one, and I do like this color overall, and I'm very glad I went with this color. This is just me personally. Some people will like it, some people will not like it. They like their standard blacks, their standard whites and things like this, but for me I wanted something a little bit different, something that would stand out. I also like cool colors. If you didn't know this, I like your light purples, your light pinks, your light blues, your light reds. I like things like that, and this really did speak to me for my taste personally, so that's why I went with this color altogether. Now what gag did I actually go with, because they do have different gags when it comes to this. When it comes to the Samsung Galaxy S10 Plus, specifically this one, I did end up going just with your standard 128 gig because that should be plenty enough storage for me. I can actually admit this. I'm one user that uses a lot of storage. On my last two phones, I actually maxed out the phone. My 64 gig one, believe it or not, I maxed out, and then of course I had ones lower than that, but my biggest one to date before this one was 64 gig, and I did end up maxing out my last 64 gig on my Note 5, believe it or not. So that's what it is, but I thought 128 should be enough. It's pretty much double my storage I had on my Note 5, and on top of that, this does have a micro SD card slot, which my Note 5 did not have, so that should be able to get me by. They do make a 512 variant, and they also make it with more RAM, so this one I think has 6 gig of RAM, I want to say 8, but that doesn't sound right. I think it's 6. Specs don't really tell the whole story anyway, but I think it was 6 gig of RAM. I want to be completely honest with you guys. I looked at the 512 gigabyte version of the S10 Plus, and I think it had 12 gig of RAM. I gotta be completely honest. I'm pretty sure it had 12 gig of RAM, but here's the thing, it's just not worth the money. Will you actually notice the more RAM in the phone? Most likely 100% you're not going to notice the more RAM in the phone, even though it has 12 gig of RAM. And then on top of that, the 512 gigabyte would be nice, but that's really overkill. But here's the real problem. The problem with that phone that I'm really having for the best S10 Plus with 512 12 gig of RAM is the fact that for what you're paying and what you're getting out of the user experience is just not worth it, and it's just too expensive. With the discount in store, with my trading credit, with everything that I looked at, and they tried to give me a deal and everything like that for the best S10 with 512, 100, and I think 512 gig of memory, like I said, it would have definitely costed me around $1,400, and at that point it's just not worth it. And I think most people, are almost 100% of people, will agree that phone is just not worth it at that point. The amount of value you're getting and the amount of stuff you're really getting is not worth the money you're paying extra. You're paying so much more money just for more memory and more RAM, which, like I said, most likely you won't even notice the more RAM in the long run, so it's just not worth it. And honestly, I did not want to pay that for it. I'm just glad I even got the S10 Plus. I didn't actually think I would be able to get the S10 Plus altogether. But let's talk about my core experience with the S10 Plus. I've had this phone now for about a week. I was purposely not making this video for a week just so I can have enough time to play with the phone and really get my overall experience. So I finally got my overall experience after a week. I feel like a week is a good enough time to where I can really talk about the phone altogether. Now let's talk about the things that I am disappointed about first when it comes to the smartphone. There's really not anything I'm disappointed to when it comes to the Samsung Galaxy S10 Plus experience. I'm really loving my experience overall. It's an A+ experience. The only thing I'm kind of disappointed about, which is kind of a nitpicky thing, and it really depends on what user, but since I was coming from the Note 5, unfortunately, it doesn't feel like I'm really getting that much of a better phone when it comes to the build of the phone. I was actually very disappointed because when I had my Note 5 before I traded it off to the actual store, I was looking at these phones side by side, and I realized to myself the build of these Samsung phones aren't really blowing me away anymore, because this pretty much just feels like an upgraded Note 5, if you get what I'm saying, because they're using the same build, they're using an all-glass design, and pretty much the design of this is pretty much so similar to my Note 5. I was a little bit disappointed. It didn't make me feel like I was really ultimately getting a completely brand new phone. In that aspect, that's just me. It kind of sucks. Like, it's kind of the same thing with Apple people who buy iPhones. If you bought the iPhone 6, the iPhone 7, the iPhone 8, all the main, like, the body build was all the same, so it's kind of a boring experience when you open the box that they didn't change the design of the phone, and that's pretty much how I feel about it. It feels pretty much so similar to my Note 5 experience. Is that a bad thing? No. Of course, that's not a bad thing, taking in consideration Samsung is so good at building phones nowadays. They use like metal, they use all glass on both sides, so overall their quality of their smartphones are A+, and they're very premium. You can definitely feel it in the hand, and they're very good to hold in the hand. But that's one thing I was disappointed about when it comes to my Samsung Galaxy S10. But hey, I was already coming from another premium smartphone, the Note 5, and the Note 5 share so much similarity to this phone in terms of the build and the design of the phone. That's really my only complaint with this phone, to be 100% honest with you. But maybe if I was coming from a phone that was plasticky or a different brand, maybe it wouldn't bother me so much, or I wouldn't be so disappointed when I first unboxed the phone and started using it. But that it is what it is. But now let's talk about some stuff I'm actually liking about this phone, and let's talk about why I actually bought the S10 over some other options. The number one main reason I bought this phone, everybody has their different use cases when it comes to smartphones, and for me personally, I use my smartphone a lot. I am one of those power users. I use it way too much. Honestly, you might even say I'm kind of addicted to my smartphone, because on my free time, I pretty much just use my smartphone all the time. But can you really blame me? Smartphones are amazing devices, and usually I like using it for entertainment purposes, because what else? So the number one reason I bought this smartphone was the fact that it had a full screen on the front. It had no weird notches, it had no cutouts, or it had no chin and no forehead. It pretty much was all screen on the front, and that's why I kept looking at this phone specifically. I was in love. There's a lot of brands still that are using weird notches and cutouts, and the screens aren't full screens on the front. Although this is pretty much all screen on the front, I will have to be honest with you guys. There is still a forehead and a chin, but the chin on the device, I think, or the forehead, is very, very small. You can still see some. You can basically see to where the screen's not full screen. It doesn't go edge to edge completely, but it's so minimal that it really doesn't matter. So you might as well call this a full a full screen on the front of the device itself, and that's why I wanted this so bad. I wanted to feel like I had all screen because I love that futuristic look. And on top of that, what I do on my smartphones is I'm watching video all the time, whether it's in YouTube, whether it's in Netflix, Hulu, Twitch. I just love watching videos on the internet. That's normally what I do on my smartphone. I'm a very heavy user of that, and I wanted more screen the better because I was already coming from a big screen smartphone, you guys know, with the Note 5 having a 5.5 inch screen, and that's already big enough. So I wanted something that would make me feel like I was even getting a bigger screen. And this one has, I think, a 6.4 inch screen or a 6.3 inch screen. It's somewhere around there. And with it being all screen on the front, I'm getting a very big screen. Let's keep talking about the screen really quickly because that's the number one thing I'm still blown away by. I'm blown away by the screen. Now, this screen on this smartphone compared to my last phone, the Note 5, is so similar that I really didn't feel like I was getting an upgrade when it comes to the resolution and anything like that because my Note 5 was already 1440p or a 2K screen, and I was already blown away by that experience. And once you get to a phone that already has high DPI, then it's like, what's the point? It's like you don't really feel like you're upgrading the screen, basically, is what I'm saying. So basically, I was also disappointed in that aspect, but hey, I'm not really surprised. The screen on this thing is still flat out amazing, but it's pretty much like I was kind of getting the same display in a sense, if you get where I'm coming from. It does kind of suck that it feels like it's kind of the same display, but one thing that makes this display pop, I do believe, is the fact that it does have HDR support, so high dynamic range. If you know anything about TVs or monitors and things like that, high dynamic range pretty much means colors are gonna pop, and for some reason, colors on this phone specifically look more vivid than my last smartphone for some reason. It could be due to the screen being slightly better with that HDR support, and a lot of things do support HDR, and overall, for some reason, whether I'm in the home screen, whether I'm just looking at applications or anything, the colors on this do look more vibrant than my Note 5, even though it's roughly the same resolution. Actually, to be completely honest with you guys, I do know for a factor, coming from my last phone, this one is a slightly better screen. I think it's actually a 3K screen compared to a 2K screen. I want to actually talk about the screen, actually talking about the resolution. So when you first buy this out of the box with your S10, I think most Samsung phones are like this, have been for a while now. When you first buy this phone, even with the S10, keep in mind you're not getting the full resolution of your smartphone. You have to go into the settings and actually turn that on or actually bump up the resolution. I know why Samsung does this. Samsung is doing this for two reasons: to save you battery life, and they're making sure that none of their phones explode, because you guys know with the Note 7 specifically, the Note 7 was one of the phones that was heavily recalled because all the batteries kept exploding, and since Samsung's still kind of like worried about that and they want to protect users to make sure they have an overall clean experience and a very good experience and not having each with their smartphone, they always leave it a little bit lower, so you can go ahead and do that. As of right now, I did not do that. I'm actually saving battery life. I am a person that does want the most clearest screen on there, and for me personally, I can notice pixels. I'm a pixel peeper, if you can even call people pixel peepers. I am a pixel peeper, which I do not want to see any pixelation on the screen or any fuzziness, but for right now, I'm okay with 2K resolution, so I'm sticking at the resolution that Samsung has. It's the middle of the road. It's not the lowest this thing can go in terms of resolution, but it's not the highest this thing can go. I might change it later, but overall, I'm happy with what I got because it pretty much looks like my last cell phone, and it's crispy as a mug. So now let's talk about how the full screen experience is actually affecting me. And the number one thing you may be asking, since I've been talking about the screen so much, is how is the hole punch cut out for the camera, because it's actually in the display. Does it bother me coming from a phone that pretty much had a big forehead and a big forehead and chin? How does this actually bother me? Honestly, when I first unboxed this phone, right out the gate, this did not bother me at all. I think the main reason this did not bother me was the fact that the camera is pretty much in the same spot. Your notification, not notifications, but all your icons are going to be anyway. For instance, like your Wi-Fi, your battery percentage, the time of day, and things like that. And that's ultimately why it did not bother me, and that's why I got used to it right away. I don't know how a notch would affect me, because a notch is a little bit more aggressive than just a small cutout for the camera on the actual screen, but right away it does not bother me. I watch stuff on this phone all the time. I do a lot of my daily tasks, and that does not bother me one bit, and I think most people it will not bother. It's not as aggressive as a notch, and it's very small, and ultimately I'm okay with this design and never did bother me. But there is something wrong with the screen, which does kind of suck, since it is a weird resolution for a screen, and since we're in a time period that a lot of phones are becoming more notchless, or becoming more bezel-less free, or trying to be full screen on the front. The problem is not every app can be tailored to every single smartphone out there, and since Android is on a lot of different phones with a lot of different resolutions and a lot of different screen aspect ratios and things like that, it's really hard to cater all these different applications to each individual smartphone. So sometimes in some applications, I gotta be real with you, you will not get a full screen experience, unfortunately. But for the majority of the applications, you are going to be getting a full screen experience, luckily, and I am very glad about that. And the number one thing also you may be wondering about is, how do videos actually play? Because for me personally, I watch a lot of video content, and some of you out there too may watch a lot of video content, and I can tell you a couple of different things. First of all, the number one website on the internet, of course, for watching video, of course, obviously, is YouTube. How does YouTube actually play on this smartphone? I can admit, luckily, you can, in the native YouTube app, play videos in full screen. When you first load up a video and you hold your phone sideways, you won't be getting videos to play in a full screen, unfortunately, but you just pinch the screen or zoom in and it'll play the videos in full screen. That's how you get around that. But unfortunately, I have to be honest, it does cut off some of the image, but for me personally, it's not enough of the image cut off that it bothers me. So unfortunately, you do have to sacrifice something there. Do you want an image that's going to show the whole image, but it's not going to fill the screen? Or do you want an image that's going to fill the screen, but cut off some of the image? That's unfortunate. There has to be some type of sacrifice, since there's no way to really play natively great on the phone, but at least they do give you that full screen option if you're a person that doesn't care if some of the screen is slightly chopped off, since you have to zoom in on the image. So I'm glad for that. Now when it comes to Netflix, I will admit Netflix does not play in full screen. Actually, if you want a little bit better experience on Netflix specifically, you do have to pinch the screen a little bit, and it will make the screen slightly bigger on Netflix. But overall, I think most people will be happy with the experience on Netflix. And for me personally, even though it doesn't fill the screen, it fills most of the screen to where it doesn't bother me at all. But just keeping it real with you guys, Netflix does not play in full screen. Same thing with Twitch. Twitch actually plays like you're playing on an older phone with a forehead and a chin. Unfortunately, that really does suck. Luckily, however, if you want a full screen experience with Twitch, don't use the native Twitch app. Use a different application. I'm going to tell you the application's name that'll force full screen. If you're somebody like me that doesn't care if it looks weird or what and just wants a full screen experience, I will show you that full screen experience now for the Twitch, because some people love using Twitch like me myself. Let's go ahead and see what that application actually is. I'm going to go into my phone. The name of the application on the Google Play Store is going to be called Impulse. Impulse is a Twitch client, which pretty much allows you to play Twitch videos in full screen. Luckily, you do have to go into the settings to make this clear to actually change it, but once you go into the settings, just force full screen and it will play all the Twitch streams in full screen if you just want that full screen experience. So there's that specifically. And then for other applications or other videos that you may not be able to find an application for, like for me personally, there are other instances. I do know for a fact that there's no specific Google Play app for these applications, so I am forced to use the web browser, whether it's Chrome, whether it's the built-on one from Samsung, whether it's a web browser. I am forced to go into a web browser, and I can tell you, at least from the Chrome web browser, it's very hit or miss when it comes to videos playing in full screen or not playing in full screen. I can't really tell you every single application that plays in full screen and every single website that'll play in full screen or not play in full screen. I can't tell you that. You'll just have to look that up online for your specific instance. Same thing goes for the applications. I don't use everything. I know some people might use different applications like ESPN or whatever, and I personally don't use those applications, but at least for the big ones, YouTube, Netflix, and things like that, they do work really well. YouTube is full screen, of course, like I said, and then again, going back to Netflix, not full screen. You do have to pinch in and it will make it slightly bigger, but it's enough of the screen well to where it won't bother you. One thing I am having to get used to, not specifically the cutout for the camera, because like I said again, that doesn't bother me. It's in a perfect spot. Never bothered me since day one. The one thing I am having to get used to slightly is the fact that this is a display that when you see it, or maybe you might not be aware of this, is the fact that it is edge to edge, and that also means the edges of the screen are curved slightly, because Samsung is known to curve their display slightly. They used to make them much more aggressive, like on the Samsung Galaxy S6 Edge and the Note Edge phone. They used to be big into curving their displays. Luckily, this one's not aggressive, but if you play videos like this in a long ways, you may have to get used to it, especially if you're coming from a phone that never had curves on the edges anyway. And for me personally, I am still having to get used to it. Does it bother me? No, it doesn't bother me. And in some instances, I actually like that slight curve on the actual screen, because it feels like it's much more immersive. It feels like some of the screen's spilling over to the edges of the actual device. Overall, I like my experience, but I can admit there is some videos, depending on where people are in the image, depending on what's on screen and things like that, it does look kind of weird, and it does make some stuff look very like stretchy slightly and things like that, if you know what I'm saying. It's kind of hard to explain, and you would probably have to see it in person if you're not used to these curved displays. But yes, it does make some things look more rounded. It looks slightly weird, but overall I'm okay with it. And like I said, in some instances I'm happy with it, but overall I'm still trying to get used to that, since I never had an edge phone. I never had a curve on my screen before with my Note 5. I know they made them back in the day. I just never was really a fan of those, and I thought that would be hard for me to get used to it. And that is something that still kind of bothers me, and I can still notice it every single time I play a video in widescreen. I do have to like get used to that. Now let's actually talk about something else. Let's talk about the built-in screen fingerprint scanner, because this time it is built into the glass or under the glass, and you may be wondering how that actually works. And on my last phone, my Note 5, I used this fingerprint scanner for a while, but then I turned it off because it was actually giving me problems. It was still very clunky and still very bad. Basically, every time I would go to hit my finger, sometimes it would miss, and I was just having enough problems with it, so I completely turned it off. And I'm willing to give the fingerprint scanner another chance, because I will admit, in my opinion, if they can fix it and they're very fast and they're very accurate, then I will use it, because I don't like using passwords and things like that. I don't like typing them in. It takes too long, and overall, I just like the fact that you put your finger on it and you're good to go. So how was my experience? Right out the box, I purposely turned on the fingerprint scanner, because I am a fan of fingerprint scanners if they work correctly. And honestly, so far with me in this phone, I've been liking it, and I've been having a very good, pleasant experience with the fingerprint scanner. Of course, I'll have to wait and see longer. The more I own this phone, the longer I use it, how accurate is it actually going to be. But as of right now, it's very accurate. I don't even think I had one time where the phone actually missed. I may have had one time, but for, like I said, the most overall, mostly I've had a very good experience with the fingerprint scanner, so I'm very happy with my fingerprint scanner experience on this phone specifically. The nice thing Samsung did say with this phone, which I can't confirm and I did not test out, is the fact that Samsung did say that if your hand is wet from water or any substance, it should be able to still pick up your fingerprint. I cannot deny that or not, because I haven't actually tested that feature out, but I just wanted to throw that out there as well. That feature is a thing if you have your hand wet and you want to use the fingerprint sensor. It should still go, but overall the fingerprint sensor is a go, and I'm going to keep testing it. But as of right now, I am happy with that. There is also one other thing I did want to mention before I move on from the screen, because I'm talking about the screen so much and I'm so obsessed with this screen. I'm loving my whole entire experience with this bezel-less screen for the most part, and this infinity display. One thing I did notice when you get this thing out of the box, for instance, you do have the on-screen controls for like your back button, your home button, your app tray and things like that. They are going to be on the bottom of the actual display, and when you get that, you do lose some screen real estate. How much screen real estate do you lose? You don't actually lose that much screen real estate, but you do lose some screen real estate out the box. They purposely leave on those controls so you can remember where they are, but for me, I wanted the most screen I can possibly ink out of this phone. So basically what you have to go to is you have to go to settings, you have to go down to display, settings, and then display, and then you go all the way down to I don't know if you can see it on screen, it's called navigation bar. Go to your navigation bar. So I'm going to go to my navigation bar right here, and then in navigation bar you can leave those touchscreen controls on, so they'll show on the screen, or you can turn them off. If you turn them off, you do save slightly more screen, so basically you get more screen real estate. If you turn those off, you don't get a lot, I will have to be honest, but the more the better. And for me personally, I can remember where those buttons are and it doesn't bother me, so I turn those buttons off, not because they were bothering me. I just wanted more screen real estate, so that's just me personally. But just keep that in mind when you're buying this phone. If you want slightly more screen real estate, you can turn off the navigation buttons, and that's what I did with this because I want the most screen I can possibly get out of this smartphone. So that's just me personally. But like I said, if you can't remember where those buttons are, or if you just want them on screen or things like that, you can leave them on. But I wanted to talk about that specifically because that is actually a very good feature for people who want slightly more screen real estate. You may not even know this may be a feature in some of the new Samsungs like the S10, so there's that overall. Now let's actually move on to actually the battery life of this thing. How is my battery life actually handling up on this phone? So the S10 Plus specifically does have the bigger battery. That's also what made me to want to buy this phone, since like I said, I am a power user when it comes to my smartphone. How is the battery holding up? Because this battery is a very beefy battery for a smartphone. The battery in this thing is 4,100 milliamps, or you can pretty much just round off to 4,000 pretty much. I don't know how much of a difference that 100 would actually matter, but yes, it's around 4,000. How is that 4,000 battery holding up? Honestly, from right now, I can safely say that this battery in this smartphone is an absolute monster. Yes, it's not going to last you days on days on days. Don't get me wrong. I'm not going to try to lie to you guys and say it's going to last days, but at least for a full day of usage, like for instance, if I leave the house at 9 p.m. and around 6 p.m., a lot of the times I can get by with about 40 or 30% battery, and for me personally, I'm very happy with the battery life. Could the battery life be better? Of course, but I think for the bigger battery in this phone, I'm very happy with my experience. When I end my day, I still usually have some type of battery in my smartphone, and that's from a person that's a heavy user of doing a lot on my phone, whether I'm watching videos all the time, whether I'm checking stuff all the time, whether I'm just browsing the internet, whether I'm taking pictures, or whatever the case may be. I am actually enjoying the battery on this, and this is the first phone I've ever owned in my life. I can confidently say the battery is a very good battery. I'm glad Samsung finally realized 3,000 milliamps wasn't enough for a lot of people. Sure, you can bring like a backup battery with you around, or a battery case and things like that, but why should you have to carry those extra accessories around when they take up space in your pocket and they're kind of inconvenient to bring those around? You should only have to bring your phone around with you in your pocket and call it a day. So I am glad Samsung realized that more people, or a lot of people, need more battery life, and 4,100 is definitely suiting me well, and it's definitely better than even my Note 5 when I bought it on day one. That battery was just not big enough, and I always was kind of disappointed in the battery life of that, but I'm glad battery life seems to be improving, and I'm overall very glad of this battery life. This could also be due to the fact too, I'm not running it in the highest resolution. I gotta keep that real with you too, so that may be altering the experience. I don't know how less battery you would get if you went to the highest battery level, or the highest screen resolution the screen can actually support. I'm assuming if you went there, you'd be getting less battery, but overall in the middle resolution this phone can support, I'm very happy with the battery life of this phone. Oh yeah, also, I do have to talk about some other things too before I end this video. Now that I'm trying to think of everything I want to talk about in this video, I do have to say something that I'm actually very blown away by. Pretty much, I'm actually blown away by how well this sounds. This definitely sounds 100% better than my Note 5, period. I can confidently say that, and I've been noticing the heck out of that specifically. I'm not a person that really cares too much about audio. I'm more interested in the screen resolution and the and how big the screen is, because first of all, most of the time I am using headphones, so that's why. And honestly, if I'm even using the outside speaker, even if it's not the best speaker, it doesn't really bother me, because most of the time I'm watching YouTube, Netflix, and honestly, I don't need like surround sound or anything stupid crazy. I don't even care if it has 2 speakers, even if you only have 1 speaker. Just in general, I just do not care about speaker quality. I know that sounds kind of like whatever, but I think a lot of people, it's like whatever, but for me it is whatever. But honestly, the speakers in this are absolutely amazing. I won't say they're the loudest on the market, but I won't say they're the worst. Honestly, I'm pretty sure these are stereo speakers. Now there's only one grill on here, but when you cover up that one grill, you can hear sound coming out the other side of the smartphone, so that has me to believe that this is not surround sound, stereo speaker, so there is 2 speakers somewhere on the smartphone. Whether there's another hole or not, it might be built into the smartphone, but you can definitely tell. One thing, when you play videos at a very loud quality, or you're listening to music at a very loud a loud sound volume, you can actually notice the smartphone start to rumble a little, and you can feel it kind of shaking in your hand slightly. And honestly, I kind of like that. It makes it feel like the sound is very premium. There's also a feature in this smartphone specifically called Dolby Atmos, and Dolby Atmos is pretty much supposed to make the sound pop a little bit more, and I have that turned on because for my ears I did notice it, and it does make it, when I turned it off, it felt like it was a little bit more tinier a little bit. So if you want a little bit better sound out of it, definitely go into the settings and turn on Dolby Atmos. That's what I have set up on this phone, the Dolby Atmos. But yes, the audio from this is actually blowing me away from right now, at least compared to my Note 5. It's not going to beat a surround sound stereo system or even a stereo system you have elsewhere, but for a phone quality sound, I'm very happy with the sound coming out of this smartphone. And one nice thing I do have to mention with this smartphone specifically, which is not a reason why I bought it, I care less, but for all you kiddos out there who are still disappointed about no headphone jacks, this phone does have a headphone jack still built on it. It's just 3.5 millimeters, so standard headphones will work with this phone, and this is one of the last few phones on the market that has a headphone jack, and so many phones don't have the headphone jack. I'm assuming Samsung is going to start eventually cutting off the headphone jack, I would assume. Who would have thought Samsung would have lasted this many years with still the headphone jack when the iPhone for like 2 or 3 generations now has not had the headphone jack, and with things like the Google Pixel phones not having a headphone jack and so many other companies following suit, who would have thought this would have had a headphone jack? But yes, it does have a headphone jack. One thing I also love about this, which was also on my Note 5, is the fact that this does have fast charging, and if you've never had a fast charging phone, fast charging is 100% worth it. This thing will charge in about an hour and like 20 minutes, even when it's at almost no battery life, which is amazing. And even if you want to top it off to like 0.5% battery before you go, that's like 45 minutes or 40 minutes. So it's a very fast phone when it comes to fast charging. Now there is one new feature the Samsung Galaxy S10 has, which I don't think any other smartphone on the market actually has, and I did want to talk about my experience with this feature specifically. So the feature I'm talking about, which you may or may not know about, is the fact that this does support power sharing. What does power sharing mean? That pretty much means you can use this as a portable battery pack. The only condition is it's not going to be through a cable. Unfortunately, it's going to be through wireless charging, so you do have to have another wireless charging device. The best use for this is going to be the Samsung Galaxy Buds. The Samsung Galaxy Buds are going to be wireless charging. Same thing with the new AirPods 2. The new AirPods 2 are wireless, so if you buy the wireless charging case for that, or if you buy the AirPods 2 with the wireless charging case, you can use that. And I have tested this feature out. I'm not going to use it since I don't have another device that has a wireless charging built on, and honestly it's not worth it. And don't go out of your way to buy this phone for that feature alone, because that feature is still very new and it's not the greatest. First of all, it just takes way too long to charge another phone up, and on top of that, why would you really want to use it to charge another device? Because you are wasting your own battery, and you're taking the battery out of here and putting it into someone else's device or your own device. I can see this being useful though. For instance, like you have the Samsung Galaxy Buds and you want to top them off, maybe you wait like 10 minutes and then you can actually put them on there, and I think you'll get some enjoyment out of that, and maybe it'll be like a lifesaver if you really need to use your Samsung Galaxy Buds or some other wireless charging device. You can get something out of it, but just the fact that it's taking battery out of yours and the fact that it's just too slow. I did test a phone on here at 30%, and the phone said it would take somewhere around 2 hours and 30 minutes, and that's just way too long. And honestly, also, you do have to realize you do have to use your phone too. You can't leave your phone just sitting there, because if you have to use it, you have to pull the device that's sitting on top of it off, because that's basically how it works. Is you set the device on the back of this and it'll start charging, but if you have to use it, you have to take it off. And overall, the battery, in my opinion, also is not big enough. If batteries get to like 5,000, 6,000, 7,000, then we're talking about enough battery to where I feel like you can charge it, and they need to work on the way it charges to make sure it's faster too. Once it becomes faster, and once the batteries in smartphones, in my opinion, become even bigger than 4,000 is still pretty hefty, but in my opinion, still every ounce of battery does matter. Once batteries become bigger and then they also make the charging faster, then it may become a more useful feature. But my experience was it did work, and it worked okay, just too slow, and you're wasting your own battery, so I don't really see it being used all too often. But maybe in an experience, like I said, you have the Samsung Galaxy Buds and you want to top them off, or you're low on battery and you want something out of them, you can use it as like an emergency backup battery, which is kind of nice. And I can't really say anything else about this phone. It's your typical Android experience or your typical smartphone experience that you would be getting on any other smartphone, whether it's an Android phone, whether it's an iOS phone. If you used phones in the past, or if you used any smartphone, then this experience is going to seem all too familiar, because that's pretty much what you're getting with these smartphones. If you used Android, it'll just be Android. Of course, this does have Android Pie on it specifically. And then what else can I say about this phone? Overall, I love every second about this. I gotta be honest with you guys, I have not used the cameras on this yet, because when it comes to smartphones, I gotta be 100% honest with you guys. I'm not a person that goes out of my way to take buttloads of pictures. I don't know in my personal day-to-day life when I'm going to be taking pictures. I know some people take a lot of selfie pictures. I know some people take a lot of pictures on the back camera. Overall, I do know for a fact, though, you will not be disappointed with the camera on here. It's not bad. It's actually one of the best smartphone cameras in the business. Is it better than the Google Pixels, which everyone knows the Google Pixel phones have the best camera? Yes, I can say this is not probably going to be better than the Google Pixel. So many people swear by that camera, but for a top phone brand, no one I know is going to be disappointed with this camera, and most people who use Samsung phones aren't disappointed. At least if they buy the top tier Samsung phone at the time, they will not be disappointed with the camera experience on this phone. So let's wrap this video up, since this video has been going on now for about 39 minutes. I've had a lot to talk about. You can see this video is just an extremely long video, but overall, do I think you should buy this phone? Do I think you should not buy this phone? Because this phone just came out a couple months ago, I think back in March. Yeah, March, I do believe, is when this phone came out. So should you buy this phone specifically? Any of the S10s, whether you're buying the budget model, the higher end S10 or the S10 Plus like myself. Honestly, if you ask me, yes, I definitely think this phone is worth it. And a lot of people who use Samsung phones and use Android are going to tell you this is one of the best phones on the market, period. Most people are going to be happy with their experience. And honestly, I'm very happy with my experience. And the thing I still can't get over is the fact that this display is flat out amazing and slightly better than my old one. Just the fact that it's full screen on the front makes me want to watch more stuff. I'm actually even more addicted to my smartphone than I was before. I know smartphone addiction is not good, but I have smartphone addiction at the moment. First of all, this is new, of course. The newness will wear off, but just the fact that this is a full screen on the front is just flat out amazing to me. And if you're coming from an older phone that does have a big notch on it, or if you're coming from another phone that does have bezels on it, or a chin and a forehead, this phone is flat out amazing. And every time I look at this thing just looks futuristic, and videos are so pleasant to watch on this. Of course, depending again on what application you're watching videos on, but for the most part, in general, I'm very happy with my smartphone experience. One thing I do want to touch on, since I did forget to mention this in this video specifically, is the fact that there are some applications, even in the Google Play Store, that still will not fit the screen, and they're not video apps per se. Like some games won't fit the screen right, and just some applications just aren't made for the screen, but you got the normal ones covered, like Chrome, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube. All of the stock apps that come pre-installed in the box are going to be full screen, so don't worry about that. And the ones that 99% of people use, that common applications, will be in full screen. But however, if you stumble across an application that's not full screen in the Google Play Store, you can actually in the settings force applications to become full screen. However, that does not apply to video, unfortunately. I've already tried that, so don't waste your time with trying to force applications to be full screen, because unfortunately it's just for the main user interface of that application. It's not actually the video portion, so you'll be very disappointed if you're trying to do that. You will have to find a workaround for that, but I just wanted to make that clear. So overall, most applications will work in full screen. I didn't talk about other applications outside of video applications, but yes, 99% of applications will be in full screen. I guess now that I'm talking, I did actually forget another one thing. Since this is technically an edge on the display, this does have that edge feature, and I'm going to go ahead and show you that edge feature that are on some other older Samsung phones, even dating back to like the S6 or the Note Edge. So basically how this feature works is, right here is on the right side of the screen, it'll always be there. Basically what you do is you take your hand and you swipe to the left, and it'll bring up your quick apps, and these are all the apps that I use most frequently, and it can bring it up on any page. It's just a fast way to switch applications. But yes, it does have the edge feature. Since it does have an edge, I do want to make that clear as well. So you can see I have messaging, Google, Facebook, camera, YouTube, Netflix, Chrome, Instagram, Spotify, and Twitch. Those are the ones I use the most, and that's why they're on that. But that's a nice little feature which I wasn't even aware of of, and I just thought that was a display, but technically Samsung does consider this an edge display, and that's why you do get it on this smartphone, and that's why it's there. And I'm actually using that a lot because it's so convenient to switch apps on the fly like that. But yeah, that's pretty much it with this phone. Overall, I'm very satisfied with my experience. Definitely pull the trigger. I don't know necessarily if it's worth it to go out of your way to buy the S10 Plus like I did. It just depends on what your discounts are, what your trade-in values are, and everything like that, and what they're doing at the time. Honestly, I think for a lot of people who don't want to spend money, I still think the S10e is a very good option. Like I said before, just for me personally, it worked out to be that with all the discounts and stuff, it made sense to get the S10 Plus, and that's why I have the S10 Plus in my hand currently. But yes, I think the S10e is a very good budget-friendly version of the S10. Is it the best budget-friendly option on the market? I gotta keep it with you for the value and for everything. No, probably not. But if you're really obsessed with Samsungs, or you really want a good Android experience, look into the S10e. It's the budget-friendly option, and you're not sacrificing that much more to get the S10e. So overall, yes, I do like my experience, and this is gonna be my smartphone of choice for many years to come, and this is definitely my daily driver, and I'm loving every second of it. Anyway, guys, this is Wayne from MyTech News, signing out.